Today's video. Today is Wednesday, January 31st, 2024, and today we are going to be talking about the President Biden re-election campaign and how his top super PAC, Future Forward, is expected to make the biggest contribution in political ad spending in United States history going into the fall general election season. Now, this article broke as there are many places in which the Biden campaign is looking to invest following the final day of the Democratic convention between August and Election Day. And with these decisions to make major ad spending, of course, in a culmination, it comes up to a very large amount. But America has never seen this large of an amount spent on political ad spending in a swift and succinct move from a political super PAC. Back in 2020, the largest amount spent in any singular ad reservation in one big swoop by a super PAC was President Trump's with $150 million, with now the Biden super PAC breaking that record at $250 million. Now, right now, Forbes estimates that this presidential race and total election costs will be in the billions of dollars. And that's exactly where it was back in 2020 and 2016. And as elections become increasingly more expensive, the expectation here is that the super PACs follow suit. And that's exactly what the Biden campaign is beginning on doing now. Now, as I just talked about in my video discussing the top Senate priorities for Democrats, just yesterday even, we unpacked some of the early ad reservations of nearly $60 million from the Senate Democratic PAC there. And the reason why that was so important is because it revealed to us the strategy in terms of the winning campaign, what the campaign side of things believes is necessary to win in order to win that election. And it's no different when it comes down to President Biden. This super PAC here, again, Future Forward, touted an amazing amount of money when it came down to their fundraising back in the 2023 election cycle. It was so extravagant and it was such a significant sum that people kept asking, what are they going to do on this? The Biden campaign has been far from forward-facing, and only recently has the Biden campaign and Biden himself begun to start campaigning in battleground states or in states where he otherwise would have a strong victory, at least in the Democratic primary. And so in these early stages of a campaign, the Biden campaign has very much been sitting on these millions of dollars, raising over $100 million last year, with the super PAC raising over $200 million last year. A lot of the money that is being spent now, or expected to be spent, is money that has been accumulating over the past 3 years, when the Biden campaign practically knew from the beginning that they would be running for re-election. I will also say that this comes in at a very good point in time for the Democratic Party, as President Trump is still facing off a challenger in a Republican primary that is soon to be over. With Nikki Haley staying in the race and polling around 20% nationwide, she doesn't see a reason to withdraw from the race and decides here that she is going to prolong the inevitable. And although that may not be necessarily good political instincts for Nikki Haley, I'm not entirely sure as to what her future might be, but regardless, it helps the Democratic Party, and Democrats know that. While the Trump campaign, even Donald Trump himself admitting at his New Hampshire victory speech that they are wasting money on this Republican primary, as Donald Trump is spending money on ad buys against Nikki Haley and trying to at least pivot towards the general election, despite having these primaries still faced up against him, the Democrats are locking in on early rates. The good news about the Biden campaign jumping in on this isn't just that they are making major headways by getting this large of a sum established and prepared to be spent in this upcoming election cycle, but also rates are lower. Think about it sort of like a sale. Right now, these TV ad waves are looking for people on the political side to spend on their rates, right? They're looking for people to lock in now on spending tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars across these media markets. And so when the Biden campaign comes in and says, we're here to offer you $30 million in Nevada, right? $40 million in North Carolina, whatever the numbers are, whatever the metrics are, they say absolutely, and they allow them the ability to lock in these slots. And as the article from the New York Times suggests, when it first broke, I'd be definitely would recommend you reading this if you have a New York Times subscription. It very much compiles all the information you need to know about what they determine to be a historic ad blitz here, is that it gives them also negotiating power, which means that by the time the election comes around and when Donald Trump actually starts to be able to focus on the general election because Nikki Haley's out of the race or he wins the nomination outright, whatever it might be, you're at a point in time where the Biden campaign has already made this devotion to these advertisement groups, has already made a way into the media markets here, and Donald Trump and his campaign will be spending more and fighting for less. And so I think it's a very, very strong move, and one that I think doesn't really come too much of a surprise, knowing exactly how much money, again, the Biden campaign has simply just been sitting on. When you think about it from the perspective of where they were a year ago, everybody was saying, when is Biden going to even announce, right? When is he even going to get in this race and decide that he's running for president? And even though, that has been a known fact amongst people who have been watching politics closely, largely to the American public, it wasn't known fact. And so when Biden announced he raised historic amounts of money in 24 hours throughout the first year there, 2023, you now see that they raised a combined over $300 million, and everybody kept asking, where is this money going? Well, very clearly, it just simply wasn't being spent to allow for something like this. And like I said, if you are interested any more than what I'm going to talk about in this historic ad blitz that is expected to be spent on the Democratic side, this New York Times article actually dives a little bit deeper into where this money is going to be spent. But to give you a very quick summary of where this money is going to be spent, in these states that are in yellow, which again reaffirms exactly what I have been saying previously and what many people have been saying, that these ad blitzes, or where the money is being spent, reveals the inherent strategy of the Biden campaign, or whatever campaign that you are dissecting. Because right now this tells us that we can ignore all of the noise about where Biden may or may not be investing in. The Miami Herald just recently released an article about how Biden's top fundraisers were hosting him in Miami, how Biden spoke to donors and said Florida is still in play. Well, think about it. You have some of the wealthiest Democratic individuals in the state of Florida, and you are pitching to them to invest in your campaign. I'm sure many of them are going to want to hear that Florida is still in play. But clearly, in terms of where the money is being actually spent, Florida isn't in the list. You have Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. You want to know what's the common denominator out of the majority of those states? They were all won by President Biden in the last election, and that matters here. You see, the Biden campaign isn't looking for an electoral blowout. They probably aren't even looking for any type of significant electoral mandate. They are just looking to re-elect President Biden because they see where the numbers are right now. They see that Biden is down to Trump on a head-to-head national, and so they're worried about that. They're investing in the races that right now, arguably, they are losing in head-to-head matchups. But again, they come to be the most important races, and arguably races that Joe Biden can win because he already has. Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. The only outlier here is North Carolina, which just so happens to be the state that Biden performs the worst in this rematch polling group from Bloomberg and Morning Consult, which also makes sense because Biden lost it in the last election. And so when I look at these numbers in terms of where the ads are being spent, how much money is being spent up across the country, it makes a lot of sense, and it actually is a masterful strategy, if you ask me. Because when you look at where we are now, right now the media's focus, sure, is on a lot of things, but a lot of it does revolve around what's happening on the other side of the aisle, on the Republican side of the aisle. Nikki Haley, Donald Trump, article after article. I mean, even now you're seeing the New York Times covering the amount of money that Nikki Haley's super PAC is raising. And get this as a side note here, Donald Trump's campaign raised less than Nikki Haley did in a quarter, which was quite significant if you ask me, because it means that there isn't as much money on the Trump side as there was maybe a year ago, because a lot of it has been spent and fundraised largely on this primary, where Donald Trump is spending resources and time in states where, one, he either isn't going to win or doesn't have a likely chance of winning, and then going around to other states and trying to win over and court the Republican electorate and getting tripped up while doing it. Rather than pivot towards the general election and adopt a more presidential and more centrist approach as he did in 2016, I think there's definitely some debate on that, but he certainly took a much more presidential, calm, and reserved look leading into the 2016 election. I mean, he did a lot back then that won over the general electorate and won over the general populace, but something that he cannot do right now because he is restricted by the presence of Nikki Haley in this race, and his money is also restricted. And so the Biden campaign recognizes that, is using that to their advantage, but they are also not stupid about where they are spending their money. You notice here too that although Joe Biden lost the state of Florida by 3, it isn't on the list. Although he lost the state of Texas by 5, it isn't on the list. I mean, some of these states that Donald Trump has a good chance of winning, such as Florida and Texas, Ohio and Iowa, might have been targets for Democrats in 2020 and 2016, but don't seem to be targets now. Because again, the Biden campaign is concerned about winning and not concerned about running up the margin. I think they know that this election is actually going to be close. This isn't going to be a cakewalk, as some Democrats might have predicted or foretold when all of these criminal allegations were being presented against President Trump. There are a lot of reasons to think that President Biden could win, but there are equal amounts of reasons to see why President Trump does as well. And so I think they are taking no chances and not trying to expand their map in any way. And although President Biden has said to donors here that Florida is still in play, or his top fundraisers are reaffirming that when they speak to the media or speak to some of these top donors, at the end of the day, the money speaks for itself. And President Biden and his top officials can say whatever they would like to these donors and let them hear what they want to hear in the state where they are fundraising, which is why I think it really makes a lot of sense, and we can ignore all the noise here. Because right now, future forward, the Biden PAC that has raised over $200 million is committing to spending $250 million between the August convention, which ends on August 22nd, 2024, and Election Day in these 7 battleground states, and why it shows that Biden's strategy to win re-election comes down to these 7 states. Ignore the noise, focus on the money, because that speaks louder than quite literally anything in American politics. And when you see it, and when you start to realize that this is exactly what the Biden campaign strategy has practically always been, it starts to make a lot of sense. Biden will be popping up in Michigan. He just announced that after getting the endorsement from a very major union across the United States. You also find here that President Biden is focusing a lot on states like Pennsylvania, going down to South Carolina, probably going up to North Carolina, has expected to make visits into Arizona, Wisconsin, Nevada, Georgia over the next year. And so what we will see here, next month or two, and what we will see here is that the Biden campaign will hone in on these states, ignoring the noise, ignoring Donald Trump's investments into Connecticut, into New Jersey, into New York, because at the end of the day, we know how the overwhelming majority of this nation is going to vote. And that is very helpful and useful information when you use it effectively. That's exactly what the Biden campaign is doing here. The last thing I will leave you with from this super large investment, a historic one that has made American history and will be the largest investment we will likely see in one big swoop of this election cycle from any super PAC, from any campaign, is that because they only did fundraise, and I say only just to sort of put things into perspective here, because they only raised $208 million in 2023. The $250 million commitment means they have more coming, and they have raised more. The Biden campaign isn't tapping out yet. We just simply don't have the 2024 first quarter numbers because the first quarter isn't over. But what we will see is that as we get to a closer point of Biden versus Trump, we will come into a much better and much bigger idea of the amount of money that Biden and his campaign has. Because although there are some indications here that they might be spending money in states they simply cannot win, right now, we aren't seeing it. And this commitment that goes above and beyond what they have already fundraised means they have a lot more coming. A lot more, tens of millions more, potentially hundreds of millions more. Like I said, Forbes expects this election to be the largest election cycle in our lifetime and for a while now when it comes down to the amount of money that will be spent in this race. It isn't just Forbes. It's quite literally every economic metric that tracks the way that election spending has been going and the trajectory upwards and upwards and upwards. The average congressional race cost over $10 million to win if it's competitive. You are talking some of these congressional districts, like ones in California and New York, where the media markets are exceptionally high, costing anywhere from $20 to $30 to $40 million when it comes down to these battleground districts. And so when you take a look at individual states and battleground ones at that, some of which have major cities with major media markets: Phoenix, Las Vegas, Detroit, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, Charlotte, Atlanta, all across the country, Raleigh even, which is a major media market there. You find that these states will require excessive amounts of spending and also equally reveal the importance of them in this election cycle. Ignore the noise, follow the money because it tells all. And the Biden campaign's commitment now to spending $250 million in this ad blitz from the Future Forward PAC is making history. And the question is now, how does the Trump campaign respond to? But considering the fact that they actually fundraise less than Nikki Haley did, I'm not sure if they can match where the Biden team is, but only time will tell. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you all later today. And sorry about that. I died towards the end. But again, see you guys later today.